The Animals' New Year's Eve. The day's work was done at the forest ranches. Supper was over, and the peasants sat about and chatted. It was a long time since they had been in the forest of a summer's night, and they seemed reluctant to go to bed and sleep. It was as light as day, and the dairymaids were busy with their needlework. Ever and anon they raised their heads, looked towards the forest, and smiled. "Now we are here again," they said. The town, with its unrest, faded from their minds, and the forest, with its peaceful stillness, enfolded them. When at home, they had wondered how they should ever be able to endure the loneliness of the woods. But once there, they felt that they were having the best of times. Many of the young girls and young men from neighboring ranches had come to call upon them, so that there were quite a lot of folk seated on the grass before the cabins, but they did not find it easy to start conversation. The men were going home the next day, so the dairymaids gave them little commissions and bade them take greetings to their friends in the village. This was nearly all that had been said. Suddenly, the eldest of the dairy girls looked up from her work and said laughingly, "There's no need of our sitting here so silent tonight, for we have two storytellers with us. One is Clement Larsen, who sits beside me, and the other is Bernhard from Hlsnglnd, who stands back there gazing towards Black's Ridge. I think we should ask each of them to tell us a story. To the one who entertains us the better, I shall give the muffler I am knitting." This proposal won hearty applause. The two competitors offered lame excuses, naturally, but were quickly persuaded. Clement asked Bernhard to begin, and he did not object. He knew little of Clement Larsen, but assumed that he would come out with some story about ghosts and trolls. As he knew that people liked to listen to such things, he thought it best to choose something of the same sort. "Some centuries ago," he began, "a dean here in Hlsnglnd township was riding through the dense forest on New Year's Eve. He was on horseback, dressed in fur coat and cap. On the pommel of his saddle hung a satchel in which he kept the communion service, the prayer book, and the clerical robe. He had been summoned on a parochial errand to a remote forest settlement, where he had talked with a sick person until late in the evening. Now he was on his way home, but feared that he should not get back to the rectory until after midnight. As he had to sit in the saddle when he should have been at home in his bed, he was glad it was not a rough night. The weather was mild, the air still, and the skies overcast. Behind the clouds hung a full round moon, which gave some light, although it was out of sight. But for that faint light, it would have been impossible for him to distinguish paths from fields, for that was a snowless winter, and all things had the same grayish-brown color. The horse the dean rode was one he prized very highly. He was very strong and sturdy, and quite as wise as a human being. He could find his way home from any place in the township. The dean had observed this on several occasions, and he relied upon it with such a sense of security that he never troubled himself to think where he was going when he rode that horse. So he came along now in the grey night through the bewildering forest, with the reins dangling and his thoughts far away. He was thinking of the sermons he had to preach on the morrow, and of much else besides, and it was a long time before it occurred to him to notice how far along he was on his homeward way. When he did glance up, he saw that the forest was dense about him, as at the beginning, and that he was somewhat surprised, for he had ridden for so long that he should have come into the inhabited portion of the township. Hlsnglnd was about the same then as now. The church and parsonage and all the large farms and villages at the northern end of the township, while at the southern part there were only forests and mountains. The dean saw that he was still in the unpopulated district, and knew that he was in the southern part, and must ride to the north to get home. There were no stars, nor was there a moon to guide him, but he was a man who had the 4 cardinal points in his head. He had the positive feeling that he was traveling southward, or possibly eastward. He intended to turn the horse at once, but hesitated. The animal never strayed, and it did not seem likely that he should do it now. It was more likely that the dean was mistaken. He had been far away in thought, and had not looked around at the road, so he let the horse continue in the same direction, and again lost himself in his reverie. Suddenly, a big branch struck him and almost swept him off the horse. Then he realized that he must find out where he was. He glanced down and saw that he was riding over a soft marsh, and there was no beaten path. The horse trotted along at a brisk pace and showed no uncertainty. Again, the dean was positive that he was going in the wrong direction, and now he did not hesitate to interfere. He seized the reins and turned the horse about, guiding him back to the roadway. No sooner was he there than he turned again and made straight for the woods. The dean was certain that he was going wrong, but because the beast was so persistent, he thought that he was trying to find a better road, and let him go along. The horse did very well, although he had no path to follow. If a precipice obstructed his way, he climbed it as nimbly as a goat, and later, when he had to descend, he bunched his hooves and slid down the rocky inclines. May he only find his way home before church hour, thought the dean. I wonder how the Hlsnglnd folk would take it if I were not at my church on time. He did not have to brood over this long, for soon he came to a place that was familiar to him. It was a little creek where he had fished the summer before. Now he saw that it was as he had feared. He was in the depths of the forest, and the horse was plodding along in a southeasterly direction. He seemed determined to carry the dean as far from the church and rectory as he could. The clergyman dismounted. He could not let the horse carry him into the wilderness. He must go home. And since the animal persisted in going the wrong direction, he decided to walk and lead him until he came to more familiar roads. The dean wound the reins around his arm and began to walk. It was not an easy matter to tramp through the forest in a heavy fur coat, but the dean was strong and hardy, and had little fear of overexertion. The horse, meanwhile, caused him fresh anxiety. He would not follow, but planted his hooves firmly on the ground. At last the dean was angry. He had never beaten that horse, nor did he wish to do so now. Instead, he threw down the reins and walked away. "We may as well part company here, since you want to go your own way," he said. He had not taken more than 2 steps before the horse came after him, took a cautious grip on his coat sleeve, and stopped him. The dean turned and looked at the horse straight in the eyes, as if to search out why he behaved so strangely. Afterward, the dean could not quite understand how this was possible, but it is certain that, dark as it was, he plainly saw that the horse's face, and read it like that of a human being. He realized that the animal was in a terrible state of apprehension and fear. He gave his master a look that was both imploring and reproachful. "I've served you day after day and done your bidding," he seemed to say. "Will you not follow me this one night?" The dean was touched by the appeal in this animal's eyes. It was clear that the horse needed his help tonight, in one way or another. Being a man through and through, the dean promptly determined to follow him. Without further delay, he sprang into the saddle. "Go on," he said. "I will not desert you since you want me. No one shall say of the dean and Hlsnglnd that he refused to accompany any creature who was in trouble." He let the horse go as he wished, and thought only of keeping his seat. It proved to be a hazardous and troublesome journey, uphill most of the way. The forest was so thick that he could not see 2 feet ahead, but it appeared to him that they were ascending a high mountain. The horse climbed perilously steeps. Had the dean been guiding, he should not have thought of riding over such ground. "Surely you don't intend to go up the Black's Ridge, do you?" laughed the dean, who knew that was one of the highest peaks in Hlsnglnd. During the ride, he discovered that he and the horse were not the only ones who were out that night. He heard stones roll down and branches crackle as if animals were breaking their way through the forest. He remembered that wolves were plentiful in that section, and wondered if the horse wished to lead him to an encounter with wild beasts. They mounted up, and higher they went, the more scattered were the trees. At last they rode on almost bare highland, where the dean could look in every direction. He gazed out over immeasurable tracts of land, which went up and down in mountains and valleys covered with somber forests. It was so dark that he had difficulty in seeing any orderly arrangement, but presently he could make out where he was. "Why, of course, it's Black's Ridge that I've come to," he remarked to himself. "It can't be any other mountain, for there in the west I see Wndrfl Island, and to the east the sea glitters around Ag Island. Towards the north also I see something shiny. It must be Dvntrs. In the depths below me I see white smoke from Neon Falls. Yes, I'm up on Black's Ridge. What an adventure! When they were at the summit, the horses stopped behind a thick pine as if to hide. The Dean bent forward and pushed aside the branches, that he might have an unobstructed view. The mountain's bald plate confronted him. It was not empty and desolate, as he had anticipated. In the middle of an open space was an immense boulder, around which many wild beasts had gathered. Apparently, they were holding a conclave of some sort. Near to the big rocks he saw bears, so firmly and heavily built that they seemed like fur-clad blocks of stone. They were lying down, and their little eyes blinked impatiently. It was obviously that they had come from their winter sleep to attend the court, and that they could hardly keep awake. Behind them, in tight rows, were hundreds of wolves. They were not sleepy, for wolves are more alert in winter than in summer. They sat upon their haunches, like dogs, whipping the ground with their tails and panting, their tongues lolling far out of their jaws. Behind the wolves the lynx skulked, stiff-legged and clumsy, like misshapen cats. They were loath to be among the other beasts, and hissed and spat when one came near them. The row back of the lynx was occupied by the wolverines, with dog faces and bare coats. They were not happy on the ground, and they stamped their pads impatiently, longing to get into the trees. Behind them, covering the entire space to the forest border, leapt the foxes, the weasels, and the martens. These were small and perfectly formed, but they looked even more savage and bloodthirsty than the larger beasts. All this the Dean plainly saw, for the whole place was illuminated. Upon the huge rock at the center was the wood nymph, who held in her hands a pine torch which burned in a big red flame. The nymph was as tall as the tallest tree in the forest. She wore a spruce brush mantle and had spruce cone hair. She stood very still, her face turned towards the forest. She was watching and listening. The Dean saw everything as plain could be, but astonishment was so great that he tried to combat it, and would not believe the evidence of his own eyes.